Imagine being born with a gift that allows you to speak to the dead, to see the dead, to hear the dead, maybe even hear more than just discorporate spirits. Can we actually communicate with the realm of interdimensional beings, aliens, cryptid creatures? Well, I wanted to talk to a friend about this, somebody who I know and I trust and has seen it all. His career is expansive and he has done many things. Things that intrigues me about his journey is how he began as a medium, someone who people would come to try to elicit communication with the spirit realm. And quickly his life was flipped and he began seeking the spirits of haunted locations to try to understand and piece together the puzzle of why these spirits are still there. Chip Coffey is our guest next, right here on the very best in paranormal programming. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is my Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney. He won't know. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Our guest is a dear friend. Thousands of people worldwide have turned to Chip Coffey in their time of need. Chip is a clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient psychic, as well as a fully conscious medium who's blessed to have the God-given ability to provide others with insight, guidance, and direction. As a medium, he is also able to reconnect his clients with their deceased loved ones. And if you are maybe living in a cave and have not watched paranormal TV programming for the last 18 years, you may not recognize this man, but to anybody who's tuned to any programs that have come out, you will recognize our guest this evening as one of the most talented mediums and one of the most heartfelt spiritual leaders that we've had a chance to work with. It has been a while since he's visited with me on a podcast, and I'm so delighted to have him here with me tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Chip Coffey. Good evening, Chip.
Hello, Mr. Schrader. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing better now that you're here with me this evening. Thank you for sharing a little time.
I appreciate you asking me to be with you this evening. Thank you.
You know, I get one of the most requested episodes I ever get from people, no matter what iteration of paranormal podcasting I'm doing, is people always want me to go back into the archives and pull out that episode of you and Maria Simpson talking about
Yes.
John Lennon and Mark David Chapman, which was one of my absolute favorite episodes and really freaks people out.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it was an interesting interview to sit there. And if you've missed it in the past, Chip had a friend who was friends with Mark David Chapman, and she agreed to come on under the mask of anonymity using a different name to talk about her experiences with Mark David Chapman as a youngster and how he came to visit her just days before the assassination of John Lennon. And if I remember this correctly, I asked her, I said, now that you think about it, and you said you had extra people with you that day that he wasn't expecting. She goes, yes, my kids had friends over. I said, do you think there's any chance he came to see you with a specific reason in mind before he went to go see John Lennon? And there was that moment of hesitation and anxiety you could hear raise in her voice. And if I remember correctly, Chip, she didn't do any more interviews about that pretty much after that point.
No, she didn't. She really doesn't like talking about it that much.
Right. And that was a bit of a shock to her to even take into consideration that maybe he had come there to do something nefarious before he moved on to try to murder one of the world's most famous people.
Well, Mark taught her kids at the YMCA, and he stayed in their house a lot. They had a nickname for him because he taught swimming and archery. They called him Nemo. And when he came to see her once, her daughter knew Mark really well, and he came to visit them once, and she ran and hid behind her mother. And her mother says, well, what's the matter with you? She goes, I'm afraid of him. And she goes, well, that's Nemo. And she goes, no, it's not. And when she called him Nemo, he said, don't ever call me that again. And she says, Why? What's wrong with that? And he goes, Nemo means nothing.
Yikes.
So yeah, there were a lot of things going on with Mark, with
Very
his
strange.
psychopathology and everything that was going on with him. But the scary part about it was, if you remember, when he was arrested for what happened, they one of the things that he said, and I'll use the name Maria Simpson rather than the person's real name.
Right.
He said, they said, is there anything you want to tell us about why you did this? He says, call Maria Simpson. She knows everything. And he told them that he had encountered 2 demons in her house and that they're the ones that told him to go and kill Lennon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy
Bone
stuff.
chilling. Again, one of my all-time favorite episodes. Another one of my all-time favorite episodes was I got a call from a friend in Georgia, and she said, Dave, I've met this medium. You need to have him on your show. And this was right at the beginning of my podcast career, my radio career into the paranormal. And at this point, I was not a big advocate for the world of mediumship and psychics because I thought there were a lot of charlatans out there, some that people still kind of think of very highly that I have no respect for whatsoever. Some that have passed away. So I was very skeptical about it at the time, but our friend Diana Avena swore that this guy was the real deal. And what was fun for me is I said, all right, we're going to pre-record this episode. And that way Chip can't line up the phone lines with all of his friends. I can't have somebody calling in to already be a lineup. So instead, I lined up my friends and I connected them. And I'm like, you guys are going to be the ones we're bringing on. So nobody else gets through. Nobody else is going to be able to, fall in line with whatever this Chip Coffey character is trying to sell. And I remember one of my favorite things was all these other mediums had visited with us and they all said, don't tell me anything. I don't want to know anything. And this and that. And there were all these rules. And I said, all right, so Chip, there are all these rules and we shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. And you said, oh, hell no, Dave. I haven't got time for that. If you want to talk to Aunt Martha, tell me who you want to talk to. It's like a giant phone system and I'll plug right in and get to her. And I thought, I remember turning to my partner and shaking my head and thinking, we just nailed this sucker. This guy sucks. He just tell me who you want to talk to so I can make up a story. And I was sitting there and I was just waiting for it. And guest after guest would just give you the name. And that's as far as that you would let them go. But they're like, I want to talk to Bethany. And you're like, okay, that's enough. Yeah, Bethany. And I remember this one specifically. It was like, Bethany, she says that you really need to move on and that you sit in your car, sometimes in the driveway or garage, listening to your song over and over and over. And he just started to break down and he's like, I do. And you were like, you've got to let go now. It's okay. She's somewhere better. She doesn't want you doing this. And it was like taking a baseball bat to the solar plexus. Cause I was like, how the hell would this guy know this? And it was one call after another that was going on. And timing is a funny thing, right? Because a few weeks later, I get a call from this production company for this upstart TV program called Paranormal State. And they go, Dave, this is Betsy. I need some help. We need a medium tomorrow. Basically, I need somebody that's good. And I go, listen to this episode. I just had this guy on. He didn't get to bring any of his fixed callers in. These are all my friends. He blew me away. And she's like, so you're recommending this guy? Because Dave, I need a good medium. And I said, I've never dealt with mediums before like this. This guy was nailing it time after time after time. And she said, all right. And I remember I put you together. And I think within 2 days, you were out on the set of Paranormal State.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I got the phone call on Wednesday. It was so funny with Paranormal State. This was in January of 2007. I'll never forget. Toward the end of January. And I get a phone call and it's a guy named Dan Zirenkevich. And Dan worked with me as recently as a year ago on Kindred Spirits. So that's a long relationship.
Yeah.
He was a producer on Kindred Spirits. And he was doing travel for Paranormal State back in 2007. And he called me and said, no, well, first of all, I got a phone call from one of the producers. I think you called me and told me you'd throw my name in the ring. That's going all the way back. and said you thought they were going to call me. And I think I got a call from one of the producers and talked to them. And they said, well, how do you do what you do? I said, tell me what you want me to do. It's really that simple. What is it you want me to do? And they said, you really work that way. And I'm like, yeah. And then later in the day, Ryan Buell, who was the star of the show, called me on the phone. And he said, I reminded him that we had conversed a little bit through a chat board because we were both from South Carolina. We both lived in South Carolina.
Right.
And he said, well, Chip, how do you do what you do? And I said, I don't know how I do what I do. I just do what I do. Well, how do you work? I said, like I told your producer, just tell me what you want and let me go like a free range chicken and I'll tell you what to pick up. And, he said, well, we'll get back in touch with you. And I thought, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Right.
So later that afternoon, my phone rings and it's this Dan Zarenkevich guy. And he says, hey, Chip, this is Dan Z with then it was called Paranormal U. That was the working name for the show where it became Paranormal State. This is Dan Z with Paranormal U. And I understand you're going to be joining us on our next episode. And I went, well, damn, Dan, I'm the psychic and you know more than me.
Right.
And he said, no, well, I've been told to call and book your travel. And I'm thinking it'll be a couple of weeks until they're going to want me to come. And I said, well, what are we talking about? He goes, Friday. And this is Wednesday, remember? And I said, Friday as in day after tomorrow? And he said, yes. Is that good with you? And I said, well, let me clear the deck and sure. And they flew me to Philadelphia. And I drove for a couple of hours to go to a little town called Elizabethtown and film the first episode. And that was the episode called The Name, in which I gave Ryan the name of the demonic entity that had been following him around and was present in that house. And one of the things, I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, that I found very curious about that was that I flew on Delta and I'm a Sky Miles member of Delta. At the time, it was just called their frequent flyer program. But anyway, I checked my frequent flyer mileage on the way back. And the number of frequent flyer miles at that time before they changed it, they've changed it to one number up now. But the number of frequent flyer miles you got between Atlanta and Philadelphia at that time was 666.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing to me was you got on set and I get a call from Ryan and he's like, hey, Uncle Dave, I don't know about this guy. Are you sure? And I'm like, I'm telling you, man, I had him on my show. He blew me away. I don't, plausible deniability. He's never done a reading for me because I don't ask for readings. But everybody on the phone call that day was somebody I set up and I wanted them to bust him and they couldn't. The guy was on fire. And he's like, man, I just don't know how I feel about this. And then I think probably about 3 hours later, I got a call and he's like, holy shit, Uncle Dave, this guy's insane. How does he know these things? And I go, what does he know? And he goes, I can't tell you, but I needed him to know who this was we were dealing with. And he gave me the exact name that we knew we were dealing with. And I don't know how he did it. This guy's crazy good. And just from that moment on, it was so exciting to kind of hear that connection and watch you just take off. And I've often wondered, like I said at the beginning of the show, you started off as somebody who has this gift that people would come to. And, oh, Chip, I want to try to connect with my Aunt Lucy, my Uncle Sal, whatever. Now you're going out of your comfort zone from your home or in an environment that you're used to and having to go out and almost, I hate to use this word because I know people are going to take it incorrectly, perform. You have to.
Oh, yeah. You got to jump through some hoops.
Yeah, you got to be there and you got to be on
Yep.
right then and there. And I'm just curious, what kind of transition was that for you, especially walking into a place where everybody's kind of against you to begin with? They're all kind of thinking, God, this guy better not suck. I don't believe in mediums, and I know Ryan had religious issues with dealing with a medium at first as well, because Lorraine Warren was one of his mentors. And
Lorraine, excuse me, but Lorraine, who was a medium.
Right.
Hello.
Right. But and I always thought that was kind of a strange dichotomy as well. But it was great to see this kind of snowball effect. But how big of a change was it for you to go from one end, boom, to right into the fire?
Um, the only end of the fire was that I was raised Catholic, and I still embrace the faith, but I don't embrace the religion. I don't really like organized religion very much. And one of the organized religions I don't really care for is the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
But I still love the faith.
Right.
But the deal is that in growing up Catholic, I'd heard about angels and demons all my life, but everybody sort of focused more on the angelic part of it.
Right.
So I hadn't really dealt with demons, but the minute that I walked into that house, it was just filthy negative. And I've been told, oh, they wouldn't talk to you that way in your head. Demons talk to me in my freaking head. And they sound guttural and smarmy, and they talk like this. They sound kind of like this in my head. And so, I picked up, we did what they call Deadtime. And it was during that time period, I'll never will forget, I was sitting next to Katrina Weidman, and somehow I knew, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew, don't say the name out loud. And I said, I don't want to say the name out loud. I'll write it down. And Katrina ripped off a piece of paper out of her notebook that she was keeping notes with and handed me that with a pen. And I wrote the name down and folded it up and handed it to Ryan. And his face, his jaw dropped and his face turned as white as a sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that point. He said, I think we need to take a break. And he went in, I guess, his office. The whole team was set up in the basement, which was a nice little family area with a fireplace and a bathroom, where he had set up what he called his office in the bathroom of the basement. And I guess he went in there and called producers and said, what the hell's going on here? You guys have told him information and revealed information. And one of the producers said, Ryan, we didn't know that information. How were we going to tell him? We didn't know the name. You never told us the name. And he's like, well, he knows. And he then sent for me, and I'm standing in the bathroom in Ryan's office with him. And he looks at me and he said, you're either the best damn psychic or the biggest con artist I've ever seen in my life. And I just thought for a minute, and I went, thank you. I don't know what to say to that. And I remember when everything was over with and they were finished filming with me, it was winter. It was January, and it was snowing, and I had a 2-hour drive back to Philadelphia. And I was walking back to my car, and you remember David Miller, one of the producers.
Right. Yeah.
David Miller walked me back to my car, and it was snowing. And he put his arm around my shoulder and he said, you, Chip Coffey, have just elevated this show to an entirely new level. And I was flattered, and I thought, this was fun. I thought, one episode, I'm good to go. And before the week was up, they'd call me to do another episode. And I actually wound up doing, I think, 32 episodes of that show. So I must have done something right.
Yeah, you did a lot right.
Let me publicly say this out loud. I don't hesitate to give you attribution for brokering that deal. I tell that repeatedly to people, and until the day that I croak, I will tell people that Dave Schrader is the one that suggested me for that show and basically, gave me a launching pad for whatever I've done beyond this. So thank you. I appreciate that wholeheartedly, 100%, my friend.
Couldn't happen to a better guy. I was so happy and pleased that you got that opportunity, and that, like I said, things happen. And our good friend Diana Venna, had she not made that call to me, I wouldn't have been as bowled over by you, and God knows who I would have sent their direction. And it's a strange way the world unfolds and the way these things come together,
isn't it? And
yeah.
we love us some Diana Venna, no doubt about it. Diana and Jay are good folks.
Here's a quick question from the audience. Amy King says, or killing. I don't know how to say it. How do you separate the faith and the church? I have trouble with the faith because of the alienation I feel with church.
Religion, which I consider the church, feels too restrictive. It feels like it's demanding, and a lot of people that are in a religious setting are demanding with the way that they want people to behave. And if you don't behave and believe what as they believe, you're bad, you're wrong, you're going to hell.
Right.
Faith is pure. Faith is between you and God. And that's what I call the highest power. I don't call it a higher power. I call it higher, a highest power, not higher. My faith and my religion is between me and God, and everybody else can just F straight off.
Right.
Nobody's business. It's between God and me. I pray numerous times a day. And I was raised to pray before you go to sleep at night. And every night before I go to sleep, I still pray my nightly prayers. So that's kind of the difference for me. Religion, you can pray anywhere. You don't have to be part of that. But faith is pure. Faith is between you and God. It has nothing to do with anybody else.
And it's a fine line. People feel that they're walking, especially with their interest and fascination with the paranormal. And, I just real quick encapsulation again, read the Bible. It's filled with paranormal stories.
Miracles, manifestations, all of that stuff,
Right.
I mean, Jesus came back as a spirit.
That's right.
They have all these people being raised from the dead and all this stuff. People are bringing down tablets that God wrote on. You've got, Elijah going in a fiery chariot. You've got all these things, a parting of the Red Sea. What?
Right.
All this stuff going on, and then you're worried about going out and hunting for ghosts. Grow up.
Right. Yeah. I firmly believe that.
Not up there going, what are you doing? I've had priests tell me that I'm consorting with the devil. And then I've had other priests tell me, you live in God's grace. You're doing God's work. So you know what? I don't have to listen to what anybody else says. I do what I want to do. And like I said, everybody else can mind their own business because I'm going to do what feels right to me. I'm not hurting anybody. People say you're a grief vampire. People call you when they're deep in grief. I don't hold a gun on anybody to call me. If you call me, I'll provide a service for you.
And for what it's worth, I've been there both on the phone and in person with Chip when somebody has paid for a gallery reading or a reading, and he has said, "There's nothing coming through. I'm sorry," and has turned the person and their money away because there was nothing there to connect. And he's only done it when he's made connections for people. And we've seen some. I've been lucky enough to be allowed to run the microphone in the audience for Chip and be the comic relief out in the audience while Chip's, because you go from these emotional moments to emotional moments, and I'm trying to lighten it up. But I've seen some staggering instances of communication come through that is impossible. And it's not the generalized deals. I mean, I don't know if you remember that one set we had where you came over to the left side of the audience and you go, there was somebody gunshot wound. It's like a bad drug deal. And the guy raises his hand and you tell the story, and then you get done and go, all right. I'm getting another gunshot, but this is a woman. And I feel like this was an accident. And it was the woman right behind the person that you just did a reading for, whose sister had been shot by accident and passed. And then after you got done with that, you said, you're trying to clear the mental palate, and you go, I'm sorry. I know this sounds weird. I've got one more gunshot, but I feel this one is by their own hand, and it's a big man, and blah, 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 blah. And the guy behind the woman raises his hand. 3 people sitting one right in front of each other that were there with other people all had the same reading. So watching synchronistically how spirits work and bring people together, and watching the readings. And again, it wasn't just generic. It was, no, I've got this, and this woman, this person took their life, and this is how they did it. This is where they would. And it was so amazing to watch happen.
You would not believe the frequency with which that happens. I'm not going to say it happens in every group reading that I do, but in a number of group readings that I've done, that happens. I've even coined a phrase for it. I call it a hop, skip, and a jump.
Right.
It's when 2 or more spirits come through for for two or more people in the audience, and there's some connectivity or similarity or parallel between the issues with them or the stuff with them. So yeah, I mean, that happens every now and then. And Darkness Radio back in those days,
Right.
in the long ago days, the first national event I ever did was at one of your events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first event I ever did was either, I don't remember if it was at the Queen Mary or the Stanley, but one of those was the first event with you I ever did. And it was the first fully national event I'd ever done. So yeah.
And here you come aboard and people fell in love with you at these events. And I watched you do gallery sessions and Q&As. And I love that you are who you are. I love that you're never there to, not that you're not kind, you're very kind, but you don't pull punches. And I love that you are one of the only mediums I've ever seen go, oh, honey, he's pissed at you. And people, we always hear love and light stories, and it's not like negative things, but he's like, he's pissed at you, because you're being a lunkhead about this. And I just love that you're like not pulling punches, but doing it in a way that speaks. And she's like, oh my God, my dad called me a lunkhead all the time. And it was just so funny that like the things at first that are tumbling out of your mouth, everybody's kind of like, oh my God, should he be saying this? And then we find out that the words tumbling out of your mouth are the words from her father's mouth. And that's, man, what an amazing gift to have, to be able to share that with people.
Spirits are going to come back to you if you've got, I know your mom's passed, and your mom, if she came back to you in a reading or whatever, she's going to come back to you as your mom.
Right.
The same personality your mom had in life, that crazy, delightful, wonderful, loving personality, she's going to have that. Now, your mom may have been Marie Antoinette in another lifetime, or Cleopatra. Who knows? But your mom's going to come through the way you knew your mom. And that's the way it is when I do readings. People are going to come through. If they ask me to speak to someone, their loved one is going to come through as they remember them. I remember a time, may I tell a story quickly?
Of course. That's why we have you here.
Perfect. Right when I first started doing readings, I used to, before I was doing TV and had to worry about people knowing where I live and all this happy hoopla, I used to do private readings in my guest bedroom here at my house. So I had this guy call me, and he booked a reading for him and his mother. And he went to pick his mother up in Tennessee, and they drove into my house and showed up, and they both came with tape recorders, little tiny cassette tape recorders. And we sat up in my guest bedroom. I remember they sat in chairs and I sat on the floor, I think. And I asked what I always ask: tell me the name of the person, the relationship you have with the person, and how long it's been since they passed. And she told me the man's name. It was her husband and her son's father. And she told me that it had been however long it had been since he died. And I sat there for 20 solid minutes trying to get this guy to talk to me. And he was not having any part of it. And I finally said, I am so sorry. I'm going to have to refund your money. I'm sorry you come from Tennessee for this, but I'm dry as the desert. I'm not getting anything. The only thing I pick up, I said, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was quick, right? She said, yes. I said, did he take his own life? And she said he did. And I said, well, he's not coming through with anything, nothing. And she said, well, I'm not surprised. And I thought, what does that mean?
Right.
I said, will you explain that to me? She said, my husband was a big deal in college sports. He was with a university, and he was big as a college coach. And he was very well known. And I discovered that he was having an affair with his secretary. And I went to him and I said, I know what you've been doing, and I'm going to divorce your happy ass. And you're going to give me what I want in this divorce, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And if you don't, I'm going to get half of what you want, what you have, and you're not going to make another cent because I'm going to ruin you. So she blackmailed him in a way. And he was so upset about this. They lived, from what she said, in a house on a lake. And there was a dock, and the dock had kind of like a boat house, a boat shed, something on the dock.
Mm-hmm.
He went out into the boat shed, we'll call it, and took a shotgun and blew his brains out.
Wow.
And she said, at his funeral, I said to him, I'm going to clean this up a bit. She said, you SOB, I didn't want you in life, so don't you come back to me after you're dead. And he didn't. He did. It gets better. The son calls me a couple of days later. Remember, I told you they both had tape recorders. They both were recording the sessions. The son says, when we got home, we sat down and I wanted to listen to all that we had said. And he flipped on his tape recorder. And when it started to play, all he heard was static and white noise. And he thought, well, I guess something was wrong with the tape or my tape recorder or whatever. Mom pulls hers up, turns it on, same thing on two separate tape recorders.
Yeah.
He had dug his feet in and said, you know, this is not about to happen. So I found that really, not only that he was not going to come through, she took her at his word, but he was somehow able to make their tape just not exist for anything except white noise and static.
I remember you did an event here in Minnesota at the Wabasha Caves, and you had me running the mic for you for a little bit. And, you know, people, listen, not everybody gets a reading, but they're kind of pulled in by other people's readings.
Yes.
And I there was this woman who stood up, you were drawn to her and her son. And you said, okay, I'm getting a man here. He's very powerful. He wants me to know that he's here, but he refuses to speak. He's like, I'm with them. That's all you need to know. And I remember you kind of crossing your arms, and the mom and son looked at each other and hugged and just started bawling. And everybody in the audience is kind of like, what
just happened? Yeah.
What's going on? And she, through choked up tears, goes, my husband didn't believe in mediums and said he would never talk to us through a medium. And that was the sign they were looking for. And I just love those holy beep minutes that just resonate when you make that connection. And right, he learned his lesson, right? He didn't believe in mediums because they don't do what they say they're doing. Yet there he was with a medium, but he still refused to talk through the medium because that wasn't his principles. And that was what they needed to hear. They said to me afterwards, they said, if he would have come through with any message beside that, I would have thought he was a fake. But the fact that he said that my husband just stood there and glared at him and refused to say a word was exactly what my son and I knew was going to happen if he was really there. So it's just, it's unbelievable. And people were choked up over a non-answer. Like people, I remember blubbering in the aisles because they're like, oh, it's so beautiful. He didn't want to talk to her. You were laughing. You're like, wow, you people are crying because he didn't want to talk. I don't understand that.
I don't get this. One of the readings that I remember, there are many that touch me. I should say that.
Right.
But especially the ones with children or the ones with suicides and a number of others. The really tragic deaths. I remember there was a lady who came to me and she asked me about her son. Her son at the time was like 4 or 5 and he was vomiting constantly. Just really, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. They'd run every test in the book. And they were getting ready to he was losing so much weight they were going to have to put a feeding tube in. And she said, am I going to lose my son? And I said, no, you're not. And I went, what's going on? And I touched my neck. What's going on with his neck? What's happening with his neck? She goes, nothing. There's nothing. It's his stomach. I'm like, no, there's something with his neck. What's going on with his neck? And she said, Chip, there's nothing with his neck. And I said, watch out for that. I said, there's some weird connection there. And she said, all right. I said, but you're not going to lose your son. Well, she reached out to me later. No, I guess it was the year after at this same event that she came back and she said, do you remember me? And I did. And she said, I've got a story to tell you. A few months after you told us about the neck thing, we had to take our son. He started complaining about his neck, his throat. And when they took him to the hospital, the doctor said, he has got the most horrific infection in his tonsils and his adenoids I've ever seen.
Wow.
And we've got to rip them out. And they did. Dave, she said, he hasn't vomited since then. The doctor said there can be no connection, but he hasn't vomited. And I'm going to get emotional when I say this. Every year on his birthday, they send me his picture. And now he's, I think, 15. And he's doing real well. And he just didn't vomit anymore after they took out his tonsils and his adenoids. And the doctors can't explain it. They don't have any practical, pragmatic explanation for it. But he didn't vomit anymore.
It's amazing how spirit works. We are lucky and blessed enough to have Chip Coffey here with us tonight. Lisa Burgess in the chat says, Chip, will you please come back to the Pensacola area for an event?
You know, I'm not traveling that much. I will tell you the truth. I'm getting ready to be 70 years old on my next birthday, so I'm an old fart, and I'm limiting the amount of travel that I do. But you never know. If I got asked to come to that area, maybe. I've been to Pensacola before and done an event. So I don't know. I'm sort of limiting my travel. I'm taking care of my cousin who lives with me because he's kind of bedbound at this point in time. And I'm just not traveling as much as I did. But you never know. You never know.
Well, and the key element is we need to be invited. Chip and I and most of the paranormal people are like vampires. We can't go unless we're invited through the door, and we have to get hired for these gigs. It's not that we avoid certain states or areas. We'd go if somebody hired us to bring us in for these events. So it's something to bear in mind. We need to take a very quick break. We'll come back. We'll have more with Chip Coffey, more of your questions, and we'll go into psychic kids and kindred spirits and talk a little bit about the experiences that Chip had there. We'll do that next on the Paranormal 60. Hey, it's out. My book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, is out and ready to ship. If you'd like to get a copy, you can order directly from me and get a standard copy, $20 plus $7.95 shipping and handling. Or if you'd like a signed copy, only $30 plus $7.95 shipping and handling. A collection of some of my favorite weird, spooky, bizarre, unusual stories. Everything from time slips to black-eyed kids, the bloody bones man, aliens, ghosts, demonic infestations, and a near-death experience in hell. It's all there for you, and it's available now. So if you want a good thriller, a good creepy story to share, then this is the book for you. Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness. You can buy it directly through me at paranormal60.com. That's paranormal60.com. That's the only way to get the signed copies. We are only shipping in the United States at this point because to ship outside the country is obscene and costs sometimes more than the book to get it to you. So I apologize, but everywhere you can go buy the book off of Amazon.com. And do me a favor. I know that over 200 of you have already purchased a copy off Amazon.com. Please take just a few moments to rate and review the book when you're done. It's nice to go in and give it the 5 stars, but if you could just take a few seconds to type a sentence about the book, what you liked about the book, anything would really help out, because the more ratings and reviews I get, or any author that you hear on the show, the more exposure that Amazon gives for those books to be seen elsewhere. So please take advantage of that opportunity. If you buy the book on Amazon.com, go rate and review it. That would mean a lot to me. Thanks again. Come shift the paranormal with me and Dalen Spratt from the Ghost Brothers. We're going back to the Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. We're going to have an amazing time. Field trips out to a few of the haunted cemeteries nearby and a weekend of investigations right there at the haunted Palmer House Hotel. Less than 10 tickets remain. If you would like to go out and be a part of the paranormal and investigate with two of your favorite investigators, then make sure you sign up now. More information can be found at darknessevents.com. That's darknessevents.com.
In winter's grasp, a chilling tale unfolds. Haunted Magazine's issue 40. Secrets to be told. Al Capone's ghost. In shadows it creeps. A spectral mobster. Where darkness seeps. 14 signs of a poltergeist's might. Haunting whispers in the silent night. Pascagoula UFO. 50 years gone by. A cosmic encounter reaching the sky. The ghost train of Tate Bridge echoes in the mist. A phantom journey where souls exist. Haunted Magazine issue 40 is out now, available from selected outlets and bit.ly/haunted magazine. Don't be normal, be paranormal.
Hey, I've just been added to the Oregon Bigfoot Festival, and I would love for you to come on out and spend a little time with me. Ronnie LeBlanc from Expedition Bigfoot's going to be there, other paranormal investigators, other Bigfooters. It's going to be an amazing time. I went 2 years ago. They're back, and they've got a brand new convention going on at the Oaks Amusement Park in Portland, Oregon on June 29th this year. You can find more information about that over at darknessevents.com. So go check that out, darknessevents.com. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring back our guest for the evening, Chip Coffey. Chip, a lot of people really excited about having you here. It's been nice to reminisce about Paranormal State, and they want to know about the Psychic Kids. Do you still work with Psychic Kids and help them out?
No, that came about because of an episode of Paranormal State that I actually did. I did an episode called The Medium, and it was with a young girl in Las Vegas, and she was being visited by a girl who was murdered in New Mexico or Arizona. I don't remember where, but they were of a similar age, and that was the gist of the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that I had worked with kids in the past, teaching, that I had a degree in child and adolescent psychology, and they came up with the premise of the Psychic Kids show, and we did a pilot episode, and then that went to series for 3 seasons. It was never working with kids in the paranormal or spiritual arenas. That wasn't what I actually did, but for TV purposes, I did it, and I think that the show was before its time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm proud of the work that I did and we did on the show. I get asked about it all the time. I mean, and it's hard to believe that we stopped production of that show in 2010. So it's 14 years ago this year that the show stopped production.
Wow, that's hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
Time flies. Craziness. Tammy Lynn has a question for Chip. Can a stillborn spirit communicate as well?
I don't do that. I don't know if other mediums do it or not. You didn't spend any time with that soul. There's nothing really to talk about. What's the end game for wanting to do that? The answer is that soul is okay. I mean, other than that, what are you going to talk about? What's there to share?
Yeah.
People
I think a lot of the loss, of course, that people feel when that happens, of course. But yeah, with that, my understanding too is that a lot of times the soul had passed even before it was born. So there was that vacancy, the void. So there, as you said, you want there to be a connection. And let me assure you, folks, please, for anybody out there that's feeling the pain, it's not your fault. And I know that that's easier heard than believed. It's not your fault. And I can't say it's part of God's great design or plan. things happen, bad things happen to good people, and it sucks. But you can't blame yourself for these instances. And medical science is getting bigger and better at understanding these things and helping to prevent them. But be kind to yourself in those instances as well.
And if you need counseling, go get counseling.
Agreed. Yeah, don't just sit idly by hoping it's going to pass. You do need to talk to somebody. Go talk to somebody. Sandra Kincaid, thank you. Another nice donation. Happy Monday. Thank you for having Chip on. It's always a pleasure catching up with Chip. Did you like working with children that had these burgeoning abilities, or was there kind of an overwhelming pressure to you to, man, you're kind of helping to craft their future in the advice and things that you're about to share with them?
For the most part, it was a very positive experience. Some of the parents were pains in the butt, but for the most part, I really enjoyed doing the 15 episodes of the show that I did. And I think we made a difference in a lot of people's lives. And the show, for viewers, a lot of viewers say that show taught them things and changed their world. So, and it spawned my book, Growing Up Psychic. So, there was that. And it was, I'm glad I did the show and invested my time and energy in doing the show. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an amazing show, and it's great to see that opportunity for children to have some kind of tutelage. I'll recommend a book as well that I tell people about, and I think you'll stand behind me on this. There's a book called The Gift by Echo Bodine.
Oh, I 100%. I recommend that book all the time. That and A Still Small Voice.
Right. So if you have children that have these abilities and are seeing things and you want some advice or to know how to bring these children up, A Still Small Voice and The Gift by Echo Bodine. I think by this point, Chip and I should have bought stock in those two books because we've recommended them to millions over the years. Yeah.
And Echo is just, she's a goddess.
Yeah.
Echo, I bow to Echo. I bow to Echo Bodine. And she's just this amazing soul. And those books are great at helping someone who's trying to do psychic development. It's great for parents. I can't speak highly enough about those two books.
Alicia says, do you hear spirits or see them or both? And do you get dreams from spirits?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, he's clairaudient, clairsentient. He's got the ability to experience spirits in many different ways. A lot of people want to dismiss the dream visitations, having ghosts visit us in that form. Chip, what is your honest opinion? Is that just part of the grieving process, knowing what you know about psychology, or is that a real way for spirits to come and be seen and heard one last time?
I fully believe that spirits are hindered with communicating with the living because of grief. If someone dies and they're so weighed down with grief, spirit really can't get through to them effectively. And the simplest way to do that is when we're asleep and our subconscious is kind of taken over. We've detached, so to speak, from the third dimension. So it's very easy for them to infiltrate our consciousness in our sleep. So there's a big difference between a dream and a sleep state visitation. It feels different. It feels real. I had on the third anniversary of my mom's death, I was asleep and there was my mom. And it was in this kind of nondescript, kind of cloudy, foggy space. And my mom said, "Hello, darling." And I said, "Hi." And she said, "I have a surprise for you." And I said, "What is it?" And she stepped aside, and there was my mother's mother, who had died a few years before my mom did. And I remember being stunned, and I went, being the good Southern grandmother, we called her Mama. I said, "Mama." And she said, "Hey, baby." And I said, "Oh my God, I've missed you so much." And she said, "I've missed you too." And I said, "I love you so much." And she said, "I love you too." And I was crying while I was hugging her. We were just tightly embraced. And I woke up. I didn't want to wake up, but I did. And I was crying when I woke up. And I thought, damn it, that was just a dream. And then it struck me. As weird as this sounds, I could still feel my grandmother's embrace on my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew right then that what I had experienced was that somewhere in that nebulous place in between where I am and where they are, we met.
That's beautiful.
There's magic. There's magic.
Kara says, Chip, is a person able to work on psychic abilities within themselves?
Sometimes read those 2 books by Echo Bodine. Can't suggest that enough.
And a lot of the people ran similar questions by, are you still in touch with any of the kids from Psychic Kids?
Just a few. There were probably 60 of them total. I didn't, honestly, and I don't mean this to sound crass or nasty or whatever, I didn't sign on to co-parent those kids or work with them ad infinitum. It's like, think about this. If you go see a therapist and you stop seeing a therapist, that therapist is going to follow you for the rest of your life.
Right.
Or a doctor or a dentist or a hair cutter, anybody like that. So I didn't feel it was my responsibility. Chip,
do you still sell your scarves? Becky Evans wants to know.
Yeah, you can go on my website at chipcoffeeshop.com.
Very cool. And we have a link for Chip on today's program guide so that you can find his website and go in there. A lot of people asking as well, are you still doing private readings either by phone or internet?
I do private readings by phone. I will tell you that right now I am booked out into September. So if you give a call today, it's going to be September before I can get you in for a reading. I offer 3 kinds of readings. One is just a psychic reading about you, all about you, past, present, future, talking about relationships, family matters, romance, career, finances, those kind of things. Number 2 is talking to the dead. You pick the person you want to talk to, one person. I don't do multiples or open channeling. The one person that you want to talk to is the person that we reach out to. And the third is a combination of the 2.
Very cool. So there are still ways to reach out and book with Chip. That information's on his website.
Reach out and touch me. Reach out and touch me.
And for all of you new viewers and listeners, thank you. This is the Paranormal 60. You can find us here live Monday and Wednesday on the YouTube channel for the Paranormal 60, or you can subscribe to the Paranormal 60 podcast, and we actually have a full week's worth of shows where you get Jeff Belanger and Ray Odger with New England Legends on Monday. You get this episode, Paranormal 60 on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, you get the Monsters Lounge. Thursdays is Paranormal 60 News. And Friday, we go to the land down under. And our good friends Ann and Renata from Australia lead True Hauntings podcast 5 days a week. You get 5 days worth of cool paranormal content on the audio version. And please, if you do listen, rate and review it on whatever tool that you listen to. I'm curious, you and I had an opportunity, and I'm so thankful. We only got to work together once on TV. We got to do an episode of Paranormal State called First Contact, where I had been talking about this UFO ranch I had been to repeatedly, and I got a call from Ryan, and he's like, all right, Uncle Dave, because the kids all used to call me Uncle Dave when I first came into their world. And he goes, I keep hearing about this UFO ranch. Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? And I want to take the team out on a field trip. We're going to go away from the ghost and demon of the week. We want to go UFO hunting. And I'm like, Ryan, I've been there 3 times. I've never been let down. And he said, okay, don't tell Chip that this is a UFO show. I'm like, okay. So I remember getting out there, watching Ryan do his thing, and he's talking to James Gilliland, the owner of the property. And at one point, James stops and he points up to the sky and he goes, my friends, the visitors said they're going to make their presence known up in this part of the sky tonight around 10 p.m. Okay, interesting. And about an hour later, they bring Chip. Now, Chip was literally in another state. They drove him over from Washington, or from Oregon, I believe it was, into Washington, which is what we did like with Cindy Kays on a lot of the shows that we were a part of, really to discombobulate them so they have no clue where they're going to end up. And we bring Chip in, and I like a fly on the wall. I get to watch the whole process. And as Chip got out of the car and he's kind of walking, you could see him look at the house, and then he just kept turning to the field. And as he's talking to Ryan, he keeps turning to the field. He goes, I don't know what this means. He goes, and I think he said something like, I thought we were here for this house, but I have a feeling that we need to keep our eyes on the sky tonight. And I'm picking up the number 10. So maybe around 10 o'clock. And I remember everybody's jaw just hit the floor. And afterwards, there was this scramble of, did anybody tell Chip that? And producers are like, no, we just radioed the PA that we have on site to keep Chip away to bring Chip. He didn't even know he was sitting there with Chip. And we're like, this is amazing. That night, we're out in the bed of a truck, and it is one of my all-time favorite. I love telling the story at live events. People love it. And I always say it's my very favorite line ever uttered on a paranormal TV show. As we're out there at about 10 o'clock at night, this light starts cruising across the sky, and we all start painting it with these, we call it painting the sky with these green laser pens. And we're all hitting it to show where this thing is, and it stops and then starts to pulse like it's flashing back at us. And we're all just like, and Chip stands up and he goes, blast us with your power. And we lost it.
I only said blast. Let me give you the exact quote. Blast your power. Blast your power. And the damn thing did. It did. It lit up like you wouldn't believe.
Like a Christmas tree. That was astounding. And then we all looked, and it's 10 o'clock, which is bonkers. But it was so great. Chip was so excited in that moment that, oh my God, we're actually seeing a craft and it's signaling us. That was such a cool experience. And I'm so glad that of the opportunities I've had to work with you or Chris Fleming, even though they've been one-offs, they've been some of my favorite moments in the paranormal field. And I wanted to ask you about that. Not much time left in the show, but dealing with interdimensional beings, with creatures, with aliens, not the demonic per se, but what we might consider cryptids. Do you believe that there is a soul to these beings, that they are also communicating with us? And have you made contact with them?
I don't know the answer to that. I really wish I did. As a matter of fact, I don't know the answer to much. I'm going to be the one to fully admit that. If you remember the episode, the episode of Paranormal State where we went to Point Pleasant and dealt with Mothman.
Yeah.
I fully believe there was a lot going on in that town. I believe that part of it was Native American stuff. I believe that part of it was extraterrestrial stuff. I believe that part of it was interdimensional stuff. There's a grid there, and they told me things about the grid and the place where, I mean, they say they stored dynamite there. I call crap on that.
Right.
There's one of the bunkers that's in the TNT area that they said it's a grid. It's a grid. It's a landing grid. And the center of it is where everything was, where everything was kept in the center of the grid. And interestingly enough, the center of the grid now is flooded in a swamp. So you cannot get to it. I was trying to tap into whatever was there, and it felt, not in an egotistical way, but it felt superior. It felt more knowledgeable, more connected, more something. It didn't feel like any human spirit that I'd ever tapped into or connected with. So I feel like I connected with an ET. Now, that being said, those little grays can stay the hell away from me. I want no part of them. Don't want any part of them. Bigfoot, I think I might have seen Bigfoot at one point in time living in Florida, Sasquatch, skunk ape, whatever you want to call it. But aliens, no. No. I don't want to be poked or prodded.
What? Well, especially not at this age. I know we're all getting a little tired of it.
60 years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to be poked or prodded.
Do you think that some of the things that we've maybe misconceived as the demonic realm, these near-death experiences where people see and witness unsettling things, do you think that maybe what we're doing is just getting a glimpse of another universe, another dimension where it's not necessarily the hell of the Bible that we're coming into, but it's frightening because those beings look different than we do, because they're existing in a different way?
I have no clue.
Could you lie to me?
I wish I could. You know, there's this thing. I don't know, and that's the God's honest truth. I think that I've stopped saying that that's not possible. I thought I could not be shocked anymore, and I still am. So there's so much that we don't know. I mean, if you stop and think about it, Dave, we know an infinitesimally small amount of what this stuff is about.
Right.
Where it's a lot of hypothesis and conjecture is the word I'm looking for, theory, whatever. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. So, am I talking to the dead? I truly believe that I am. Could I swear to it in court? I would, but I don't know the validity of it. How do I do what I do? I'm clueless. It just floats into my head and comes out of my mouth. That's all I know.
We'll do the director's cut and just go a few minutes over because I do want to kind of round out with we've talked Paranormal State, we've talked the Psychic Kids, Kindred Spirits. The news is that the show has not been picked up again for another season. You've kind of led a remarkable life, 3 different lives in the TV realm with these kind of shows. If another show came around in a year or 2 from now, would you be willing to go back in on a regular basis? Or would you prefer maybe just to be the consultant from time to time?
I think right now it's probably 50-50. I've got a lot on my plate, with my age, and I don't love traveling anymore. Traveling will suck the soul out of you, suck the life out of you. And, taking care of my cousin Kenny, that's another responsibility that I have.
Right.
I have to have somebody come in and stay with him while I'm away. So I'm not sure that I would want to delve into. I would invite me for a guest spot if you've got it. And I would certainly welcome that. But full-time cast member at this point in time, the chances are swayed over toward, I don't think so.
What's a favorite memory from Kindred Spirits since we've shared a few from the other shows?
Gosh. I think one of the most heartrending things that I went through was the first appearance I did on the show on an episode called Lost Amy. And we were investigating a house in the surrounding area of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they thought it was the grandmother that was haunting the family. And this little girl showed up. And I said, I thought her name was Amelia or Emily or something like that. And they did some research on it. And I described it. She had been abused and she had died when she was 3 or 4 years old. And Amy and Adam did research and found out that less than a mile from this house, a little girl named Amy, pretty close to Amelia or Emily. And I probably wouldn't have said Amy because that's the person who show's name. She had been put into a scalding hot bathtub by her stepmother at 3 or 4 years old. And had second and third degree burns on 70% of her body.
Oh.
And they took her to the hospital and she died of cardiac arrest. So that child showed up at the house because Amy had a child exactly that same age at the time. And the mother in the house was very loving and motherly. So she was very attracted to that energy. Boo Buddy is a bear that is well known in the paranormal community. It responds to EVP and temperature changes and things like that. And it talks. It's a stuffed bear. And we used one of those in the basement when we started communicating with little Amy. And after what had happened to her with being put into a bathtub, the bear said, "Is it getting hot in here?"
Oh, wow.
And I lost it.
Yeah.
Amy and I were ugly crying. And still to this day, that affects me. Yeah. That affects me a lot. So
Ristel from the chat room says, Chip, thank you for being you. You rock. I couldn't agree more. It's always a pleasure catching up with you, Chip. And I'm sorry that it's been so long between visits and we can't go this long again. Let's get back together and touch base and have some more fun and talk with the audience. How about that?
Well, I love you, Dave Schrader, and I want you to take care of yourself. I'm going to read you for a minute.
All right.
Sometimes you've got to tell the echoes in your head to shut the F up
Yes, I do.
and not diminish your own self-worth. Stop self-sabotaging sometimes, David.
All right.
Or Uncle Chip's going to come and find you. I have an American Express card and Delta frequent flyer miles, and I kind of know the area of the country you live in. I'm psychic, for Christ's sake. I'll find your happy ass.
Yeah, well, you're on the mailing list.
I can still kick my leg up high enough to kick you right in the seat of your pants.
Well, Chip, I love you, and I thank you so much for your years of friendship and for the years that you've given to the people around this world to help them make connections. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Chip Coffey, great guy. One of the few people in the field that I truly feel blessed to have had the opportunity to know and work with, because I have watched him flourish. I've watched him get through some of the most amazing situations. And I've watched dark clouds that have rolled in, and how this man has not only lifted himself, but others up to make life better in certain circumstances. He is a good man. And for those of you fans that have followed him over here tonight to spur him on and cheer him on, thank you very much for joining the show. And I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it. And we will get Chip back again here relatively soon. We'll be back on Wednesday with more of the Paranormal 60 news. And make the best of the life that you have here. Make the friends and the connections that you can, because people like Chip will be here to help. But I do know that they prefer that you make all the right connections in life so that their job gets more diminished, so that they're not the ones that have to make amends in the afterlife. So take care of you. Take care of the people in your life and the people that mean something to you now, so that they know where they fit in your life. And make sure that you show kindness, love, and compassion, because that is the stepping stones of the mediums that we work with. And that is how they reach to the other side to speak to the people for you. And imagine having that ability for yourself by making it right here, by saying the things you want to say so you can actually hear the response from the people that you love most. Thank you very much. And may the darkness in this world be just a little more light with the information that we share right here. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is my Paranormal 60.